And so to the newspaper front pages. Well, wiped out, says the Sunday Mirror, and indeed the story has pretty much wiped out every other story across the British papers, not surprisingly. There are a few others I'll just mention. The Observer's there talking about the Libyan rebels fearing slaughter as Gaddafi's forces attack. A pretty astonishing picture there on the front page of the Sunday Times. That's the tsunami hitting the nuclear plant there. The Sunday Telegraph has also got a great picture there. You can see the boat, the ship really, in the middle of it all. Among the other stories they cover, I'm here to stay, says William Hague, responding to a lot of gossip about him. What else? There's the Independent on Sunday, don't give up Japan. So, as promised, John Simpson, Dambisa Moyo and Greg Dyke, thank you all very much indeed for coming in. We start, of course, with the story of the day. Who wants to kick off? Greg?
Well, I think the pictures, I think the Mail has done a brilliant 9 pages, I think, of pictures. I mean, good story, but pictures.
Well, it's interesting because we have moving pictures on television, but actually still pictures can tell you an awful lot.
I think that's right. The picture they've got across page 2 and 3, I don't know if viewers can see it, but it's just mind-blowing. It's a devastating picture. And somehow this is a story that we don't know the implications of, it, know what's going to happen. So we're still living through the disaster, and the pictures tell the story. And there's here a little boy being checked for radiation. And these pictures really do tell the story of something that we're only just coming to terms with, I think.
John?
Nothing more terrifying than being in an earthquake. I've been in a couple in my time, and it is the most terrifying experience.
The utter powerlessness.
Utter powerlessness. There's nobody. You can't bribe anybody. You can't talk them down. Yeah. You can't run away. It's horrendous. Yeah, and of course, I mean, there's the whole issue of the nuclear plant exploding with steam pouring out into the sky. Whether really, I mean, there's always behind every headline, in its headline thing in particular, is that sense of, the word catastrophe gets used, meltdown gets used. Actually, when you listen to the experts talking, they don't seem to think that
it may well be that actually this is going to be all right, this nuclear problem.
Yes.
Dambisa, the other aspect of this, I introduced at the beginning as an economist, of course, but the other aspect of this is all the business pages covered with this story as well, the oil price, but also the effect on the international economy.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, obviously, the human toll is most tragic and most devastating. But if you look at the economics, it's what a difference a week makes. I mean, last week this time we were sort of more concerned about high oil prices, and now we're talking about concerns about a contraction in the global economy, led by Japan, as we know, has been struggling through a long-term recession. They've got a very relatively aging population, huge budget deficits, and now very big concerns about them having to really dip into their portfolio internationally to bring money back to help in reconstruction after this incident.
If you were into futures, would you still live in San Francisco or Los Angeles?
Well, this is the other thing. I mean, there have been quite a few big earthquakes this year.
Yes, I can't remember in my lifetime having 3 so quickly.
No.
And whether
a different
yes, and New Zealand and here, and you say, is that just coincidence? Or is there something happening?
It's not. I mean, the plates are moving.
Absolutely.
The tectonic plates are on the move. That's why I say, California, a dodgy place to be now, I would think.
We said we're reviewing the papers that all the newspapers were leading with Japan. It's not quite true.
No, it's not true. All except one. The News of the World. You makes you wonder, what sort of editor is it of a newspaper at such time of devastation, of such wonderful pictures, who leads on another story about Prince Andrew, yawn, and 2 football stories about hookers, and you just think...
Well, you never know. Maybe an editor who knows his readers.
I presume the editor of the News of the World thinks everyone's going to lead on this. I'll lead on something different because there must be some people who aren't interested in this. Yeah. But it's not a very challenging position for an editor to be in, is it? No, that actually you ignore the biggest story certainly of the year and probably for some time.
John, you're just back from Libya. As I was saying at the beginning, one of the problems, in a sense, for the Libyan story is that people are focusing on Japan just at the moment when Gaddafi appears to be heading towards Benghazi?
It's a big stroke of luck for him, whether he recognises it as that or not. I don't know. I mean, I've been struggling for years, Andrew, to make it clear to people that Gaddafi is a nutcase. Had a lot of, even in the BBC, few people wagging their fingers and the Observer running an editorial about it. He is a nutcase, and, but we're constrained in what we do. There's a very, I think, telling cartoon today in The Independent, on Sunday, showing an Air Force plane, i.e. something that could intervene in Gaddafi's Libya, with a wheel clamp on it that says "Made in Iraq by Bush and Blair." And, I mean, easy to say, easy to use this at yet another stick, but there is an element of that. Nobody really wants to intervene in a Middle Eastern country because you don't know what the consequences will be.
Do you think this Arab League decision to back the no-fly zone is a big moment?
I think it's a very big moment. I mean, a more timid and often actually divided group of people, of men, we've got to say, it would be hard to find. And yet they had the guts to take a difficult decision for them. Because
it seems to me, I don't know, I know this has happened under the Labour, and now we've got a coalition government, but if you look at Britain's position, we were against Gaddafi, then we cozied up to him, we did all of these deals, and this started to happen, and we've denounced him and said he's got to go, and then he's still there. It's a mess. Greg?
We're not alone, though.
No,
we're not alone. No, I do think. I think after Iraq and the disaster of Iraq, everybody, whatever their political position, is sitting there saying, "Dare we do it, or do we have to do it?" And if there had not been Iraq, I suspect we would have done it.
I'm sure,
because Gaddafi is not loved by anybody.
He's got no friends, whatever. I mean, that's his. Weirdly, that's become his strength suddenly. There is no president of the United States to get on the phone to him and say, "I'm sorry," like they did with Mubarak, "you're out of here." Yeah. Nobody can speak.
No leverage.
Possibly Hugo Chavez.
But what's going to happen, John? What's going to happen?
Well, I think let's.
Well, I just want to say that the problem with these sort of situations is there is no sort of obvious. If these three things happen, we move in. It's quite ironic. It's on the African continent. It is part of the Middle East, but it really is on the African continent, and we see this countless times. Look at Zimbabwe. Nobody's talking about Zimbabwe now, but it really did. There were times when we all got hot and bothered about Zimbabwe.
He's used his army against his citizens.
Absolutely, and here we are. He's still in power. Cote d'Ivoire. They've had problems. They've moved off the headlines now. Virtually no one talks about what's happening in the Ivory Coast after their elections. So it's quite interesting. The international community absolutely picks and chooses when it goes in. As we know,
might say you can do what you like as long as you don't have oil.
Absolutely, and I think we should absolutely factor that into the equation.
I mean, it is a real problem with what to do. I mean, I was completely convinced by Matthew Parris at a column in the Times saying we shouldn't get involved in Libya, we shouldn't do anything, and then I picked up Andrew Rawnsley today, and I was convinced by him saying we must intervene. It's genuinely very difficult.
Well, Andrew Rawnsley puts the question here when he says, "Are we content to let Colonel Gaddafi win?" That seems to me to be the real point. He is getting closer. I mean, you were saying what's going to happen. I'm afraid what I think is going to happen is that it's just a small groups of men fighting. I mean, we're not talking about, this is not El Alamein here, believe me. This is just maybe a few dozen men fighting on different sides. Some of them have big equipment and are able to use it, and an air force, indeed, behind them. And the other lot just simply have AK-47s and a lot of spirit and a lot of guts, but that's all. And I think the possibility must be quite strong that Colonel Gaddafi will just simply roll them up.
Well, yes. Though around the world, people with guts and AK-47s have in the past done rather well, we have to remind ourselves. No AK-47s at the Liberal Democrat conference, so far as we're aware, Greg, but as a Lib Dem man yourself, I must ask you to pick a story from there.
Well, I think this one from, I think it's the Telegraph, it says Clegg forced to condemn NHS reform. I mean, it's bad luck if you're the Liberals, isn't it? You get into power The NHS reform was not their policy. It was nothing to do with them. It wasn't even the Conservative Party policy. It was nobody's policy. It was Andrew Lansley's policy. And I think everyone knows it's got a real danger of being a disaster. And the Liberals, I think, have now got to go back to the Cabinet. And Clegg's got to go back in and say, look, something's got to be done about this, because the concerns that people have got are not the normal political concerns. Yeah. Their fears are that this thing is going to be a shambles.
And of course, the Liberal Democrats used to demonstrating, now having to get used to being demonstrated against.
Yeah, but demonstrating didn't make much difference, did it?
They are demonstrating against themselves also.
They are. Yeah. There was a lovely little, it's one of the pictures, a lovely little picture of a little white fluffy bunny rabbit at one of the demonstrations holding up a placard saying, Nick Clegg is very naughty, which I thought was kind of classic. Dambisa, you've got a story, I think, an international development story. And I should say you're making a speech tomorrow at the big Commonwealth conference.
Yes, Westminster Abbey. Yes.
Westminster Abbey.
Yes. Well, I mean, it's quite interesting. I'm speaking on women as agents of change, and a friend of mine reminded me recently that in 1869, John Stuart Mills was out there talking about campaigning for the rights of women, for a more significant role in politics and economics, and just rights of women in general. And here we are, 2011. We've made significant progress. There are more women in the workforce in the United States than there are men. We see, in Africa, we've got a female president. We've got more women in the Rwandan parliament than anywhere else in the world. So significant progress has been made, but absolutely lots of work to be done. And I think it's great to be part of a commemoration.
Great.
Good old Commonwealth.
Good old Commonwealth. Finally, Greg, you're putting on your Dicky bow tonight, or whatever you put on for these things, the Olivier Awards.
I am. I'm at the Olivier Awards, as is, of course, one of your later guests, who is going to get... Stephen Sondheim. Yes, I'm just, dressing up to go along, because I'm the chairman of a big theatre company, and hopefully Legally Blonde will win Best Musical, and we'll all be happy.
All right, for now, thank you all very much indeed.